Usually when we talk about a compass, there's this expectation of absolute precision, like engineering.
Oh, definitely.
You hold a physical compass in the palm of your hand, the magnetic needle spins, it locks onto true north, and you just point and say, there it is. That's the right direction.
Right, because it's binary. It's an objective physical reality. It's either pointing north or it's not. And, well, we like things to be visible and categorized, especially when we're trying to figure out where we are going.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of human behavior, into the whole realm of our choices and beliefs, and suddenly that physical compass just completely disappears.
Yeah, it vanishes.
We're looking at a navigational landscape that is built entirely on invisible architecture. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are opening up a really dense but fascinating stack of educational blueprints.
Really fascinating.
Yeah, specifically derived from the Philippine Licensure Examination for Teachers, or the LET, to figure out exactly how that invisible moral compass is built inside your mind.
And it really is inside your mind.
Right. Because every single day, you, the person listening to this right now, you make dozens, maybe hundreds, of rapid-fire value judgments. You decide what is good, what is bad, what is worth your time.
And those happen instantly.
Instantly. And these licensure materials, they aren't just abstract philosophy. They are the literal training manuals used to test the educators who are tasked with passing these invisible rules down to the next generation.
Which is honestly what makes this stack of sources incredibly grounding.
Oh.
Because to even begin talking about how a society teaches a value to a child, these training manuals force us to start at the absolute foundation.
Right. Before we can teach a value, we have to know what it is.
Exactly. They root all of this in axiology.
Axiology.
Yeah. So instead of just arguing about what is right or wrong behaviorally, we are starting one layer deeper. Like, how do we even assign worth to a behavior or an object in the first place?
So what is the technical definition there?
Well, axiology is essentially the philosophical study of value, and it's subdivided into two main parts. You have ethics, which is the rightness or wrongness of human behavior, and aesthetics, which is the nature of art and beauty.
Okay, and to map out how we actually assign that worth, the sources bring in a framework by a German philosopher, right? Max Scheler.
Yes, Max Scheler.
He essentially built a hierarchy of values. But he argues something really interesting, that we actually engage with these values through what he called emotive intuition.
Emotive intuition.
Like we feel them before we think about them.
Yeah.
We act toward values the same way we act toward a color. You don't have to use a deductive logic puzzle to perceive the color blue.
You just see it.
Right, you just see it. And in the same way, we sense the goodness of something emotionally before our brains ever start rationalizing it.
That's spot on. And Scheller's hierarchy maps out those intuited values in a vertical progression. He argues that they scale upward in importance and endurance.
So what's at the bottom?
At the very bottom, you have pleasure values. This is basic sensory enjoyment, happiness, avoiding physical pain. So eating a great meal, seeking physical comfort.
The immediate stuff.
Exactly. Then, one step above that, you have vital values. These are focused more on the well-being and physical perfection of the body. So health, vitality, sheer survival.
Okay, let's unpack this, because then we cross a line into the more abstract, don't we?
We do. The third tier is spiritual values. Now we are looking at the mental aspects of human life. This is the pursuit of truth, the demand for justice, the deep appreciation of knowledge and art.
Right.
And finally, at the very top, the pinnacle is what Scheler calls values of the holy. This is the realm of the divine, the pursuit of the supreme good, and ultimate overarching purpose.
So looking at how these four tiers operate in the real world, it's clearly not like a video game skill tree.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you don't complete the pleasure level and then suddenly unlock the spiritual level, right?
Yeah.
It feels much more like gravitational pull.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Because pleasure and vital values, they have a really strong, immediate gravitational pull. It's like a heavy magnet sitting right next to your compass.
Yeah.
But spiritual and holy values, they are like true north.
Yeah.
They're massive and enduring, but they're further away. So it takes significantly more conscious effort to align with them.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize that tension. The depth of emotion you feel often signals the importance of a value to you in that exact moment.
Right.
And the sources offer a very practical scenario of this tension. There is a student named Ki-Sung Yang, and she decides to skip a required Saturday class to go on an out-of-town picnic with friends.
Okay, so the picnic is that immediate magnet. Ki-Sung Yang is actively choosing a pleasure or vital value like socializing, having fun, enjoying the physical environment over a spiritual value,
Exactly.
which in this case would be education, truth-seeking, and duty.
Yeah, and Scheller's framework suggests that a truly mature person aims to resist that immediate magnet to prioritize the higher tiers. A mature person recognizes that while pleasure is inherently good, I mean, we all like picnics,
Sure, picnics are great.
but spiritual and holy values are seen as more enduring. They have a lasting weight and consequence that a weekend picnic simply doesn't have.
But I mean, if Scheller's higher tiers require putting abstract spiritual truth above immediate physical pleasure, that requires a level of delayed gratification that a toddler simply doesn't possess.
No, not at all.
The human brain literally has to physically and socially evolve to grasp that distant true north. Which brings us to the psychological evolution of morality.
Yes, how the brain actually grows into these concepts.
Exactly.
This is where the sources lean heavily into Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Kohlberg proposed that human moral reasoning physically and cognitively develops across 3 distinct levels, which he broke down into 6 stages.
Right, so level 1 is the pre-conventional level. This is where morality is driven entirely by external consequences. The brain just isn't processing abstract right or wrong yet.
It's very primal.
Yeah. Stage 1 is pure punishment avoidance. Like, I will obey the rules so I don't get yelled at or put in timeout.
And then stage 2 evolves slightly into self-interest and transaction. It's the what's in it for me mindset. Like, I'll share my toys if you give me half your snack.
Then we move to level 2, the conventional level. And Kohlberg noted this is where the vast majority of adults actually operate for their entire lives, right?
Sadly, yes, for a lot of people, it is all about conforming to social rules.
Right.
Stage 3 is the good boy or good girl orientation. You do things specifically to seek approval and please your peers.
You want to fit in.
Exactly. Then stage 4 expands that to the whole of society. It's about fulfilling duties and upholding the law simply because the law exists. Rules are rules, and society falls apart if we don't follow them.
And then there is the top tier, which Kohlberg argued very few people consistently reach. Level 3, post-conventional morality.
This is the rare air.
Yeah, this is where you are finally dealing with abstract principles. Stage 5 recognizes the social contract. You view laws as democratic agreements meant to serve the greater good, but you also recognize they can and should be changed if they fail the people.
Right, the law isn't a god.
Exactly. And finally, stage 6 is the self-selection of universal ethical principles. Personal conscience and universal justice sit above any written, localized law.
And the training materials use a fantastic example to illustrate this transition. There's a student named Bailing, and she refuses to cheat on a major exam.
Okay.
Now, literally everyone else in the class is cheating, and she knows she will be ostracized by her peers for not joining in. But she refuses because she firmly believes that cheating fundamentally erodes human trust.
Wow.
She condemns the act based on a universal principle, not because she's afraid the teacher will catch her.
So she is completely bypassing stage 1 punishment, and she is actively rejecting stage 3 peer approval, just to act on an internalized truth.
Exactly, that's stage 6 reasoning.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Looking at Kohlberg's framework, if I only pay my income taxes so I don't go to federal prison, Kohlberg essentially says, I am operating with the moral reasoning of a toddler at stage 1.
Well, technically, yes.
I have to push back on that rigidity. Kohlberg's entire system feels built on this detached, cold, highly individualized sense of justice. Isn't human behavior and maturity way more situational than a strict staircase? Like, caring for a sick family member might not look like stage 6 universal law, but it requires massive moral maturity.
What's fascinating here is you are touching on a massive blind spot in Kohlberg's original work, and the sources actually address this through the critique of psychologist Carol Gilligan.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, Gilligan pointed out a significant flaw in Kohlberg's methodology. He used primarily male subjects to develop his 6 stages.
Ah, there it is.
Right. His scoring method heavily favored that abstract, cold, detached justice you just mentioned, which tended to align with male socialization in his studies.
That makes total sense.
So Gilligan proposed the ethics of care. She argued that female moral development often focuses heavily on relationships, empathy, and a profound responsibility to others. It is an entirely parallel track to blind justice.
So morality isn't just a single ladder you climb. Empathy and connection are just as valid a measure of moral maturity as abstract universal law.
Precisely. And to further dismantle the idea of a rigid staircase, the sources bring in Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory.
I love Erickson.
Yeah, Erickson explains that human development isn't about checking off a box, leaving a stage behind, and stepping up to the next rung. It is a series of lifelong conflicts.
Like an ongoing tension.
Exactly. In infancy, you navigate trust versus mistrust. In old age, you navigate integrity versus despair. Erickson argued that a person has to actually balance both extremes of these conflicts to develop a virtue, like hope or wisdom.
So you don't just, like, beat a stage.
No, you have to carry the tension of that conflict with you forever.
We are constantly negotiating those tensions. But, whether we are talking about Kohlberg's justice, Gilligan's empathy, or Erickson's conflicts, these psychological theories can sometimes assume there is a universal, factory-standard human brain progressing in a vacuum.
Which is never the case.
Right. In reality, moral development happens within a very specific cultural crucible. Your environment writes the underlying code. And to see how theory meets reality, the sources give us a phenomenal case study in the Philippine cultural context.
Oh, the Philippine context provides a highly visible landscape of how these competing values operate in real time.
Yeah.
Anthropologist F. Landa Jocano is heavily referenced here, and he presents a vital thesis. He says there are no negative Filipino values.
Wait, really? No negative values?
None. There are only wrong uses of them. The cultural tool itself is neutral. The morality is dictated by how the tool is wielded.
And to understand those tools, you really have to look at the mechanism of how history shaped them. You start with Oriental roots, which embedded a deep structural focus on blood ties, family, and interpersonal harmony.
Right, the core social unit.
Then you layer on the Occidental or Spanish colonial influence. This brought a heavy religious framing and the culture of fiestas. But importantly, the colonial dynamic also created a specific historical aversion to manual labor among the local population because labor was tied to subjugation.
And then you add the American influence, which introduced democratic systems and, crucially, the public school system.
Right.
For the first time, education wasn't just for the Spanish-era elite. It was framed as the ultimate ticket to social mobility.
Which explains so much.
Yeah. That is precisely why you see such an intense, almost sacred reverence for education and passing licensure exams like the LAT today. It's not just schooling, it is a cultural mechanism for survival and family advancement.
When you mix all those historical forces together, you get incredibly unique cultural traits. And the positive manifestations are profound.
They really are.
The sources highlight Bayanihan, the spirit of communal cooperation. Like if a neighbor's roof blows off, the community rebuilds it. The modern equivalent cited is Gawad Kalinga, which is an organization mobilizing thousands to build homes for the poor.
It's beautiful.
You also have Pakikipakapotao, a deep sense of shared humanity and empathy that perfectly mirrors Gilligan's ethics of care.
Yes, exactly.
And the unmatched adaptability. The text cites an amazing example of students taking old, discarded illustration boards and creatively engineering them into functional school bags. That is resilience manifested into physical reality.
But going back to Jocano's thesis, those exact same values can be misused.
Right, the double-edged sword.
Exactly. When adaptability and the desire to present well to your community go awry, you get the forma over substance mentality.
Form over substance.
Yeah, prioritizing outward form over actual substance. The training materials give the example of a student submitting a terribly written, hollow book report, but placing it inside a beautifully ornate, highly decorated folder.
To distract the teacher.
Right. The hope is that the visual aesthetic will mask the academic emptiness.
That forma over substance example is brilliant because it isn't just a local classroom issue. That is the entire behavioral model of the modern internet.
Oh, absolutely.
It is Instagram and TikTok culture, making things look aesthetically flawless, projecting the image of a perfect life or deep intellect, even if the actual content behind the photo is completely empty.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, forma over substance isn't just vanity. It is a hack for Kohlberg's Stage 3.
Oh, wow. Stage 3, social approval.
Yes, Stage 3 is all about seeking social approval. The human brain realizes it can get the evolutionary reward of social acceptance just by looking competent, entirely bypassing the hard, time-consuming work of actually being competent.
That is a massive insight. We are optimizing for the reward without doing the work. And that double-edged sword applies to other cultural traits, too. Take Pakipipakapotao, that beautiful loyalty to family and shared humanity. When that personal loyalty supersedes the law or objective fairness, it mutates into extreme personalism. It becomes nepotism. It leads to subjective grading by teachers who just want to help a relative, or, on a larger scale, graft and corruption in government.
Or consider the concept of bahalana.
Okay, what's that?
At its best, it is a courageous willingness to take a risk when facing the unknown, trusting in a higher power or your own resilience. It is the ability to step into uncertainty.
That sounds great.
It is, but misused, it becomes fatalism. It turns into a passive resignation where people just say, well, it's out of my hands, and do absolutely nothing to improve a negative situation.
So what does this all mean? If these cultural values have this wild, double-edged nature, society can't just leave moral development to chance. We can't just cross our fingers and hope the next generation figures out the positive side of the sword.
No, we definitely can't.
There has to be a mechanism to consciously guide people toward the higher end of Schiller's hierarchy. And according to the training materials, that mechanism is education.
Yes. Society relies on education to calibrate the compass. And the operational framework the sources highlight here is the UNESCO 4 Pillars of Learning.
Right.
These pillars are designed to ensure that education isn't just about memorizing facts, but about building the architecture of the whole person.
Let's break down how these actually function. Pillar 1 is learning to know. This is the cognitive foundation, right? Understanding, concentration, developing the actual skills to acquire knowledge.
Basically learning how to learn.
Right. Then pillar 2 is learning to do. This is the application phase. It's taking that knowledge and transforming it into real-world work, vocational efficiency, and innovation.
Pillar 3 is learning to live together. This is where education addresses the cultural crucible directly. It is the practical application of teaching tolerance, handling conflicts, and respecting diversity.
So group work.
Exactly. In a classroom, this looks like group projects that force students to navigate differing opinions, laying the groundwork for global peace education.
And the last one.
Finally, Pillar 4 is learning to be. This is the holistic development of the physical, intellectual, emotional, and ethical person. It means a teacher isn't just grading a math test. They are actively monitoring the student's emotional regulation and ethical reflection.
But how does a teacher actually teach someone to be ethical? The materials heavily reference psychologist Albert Bandura's social cognitive learning theory, specifically the mechanism of modeling.
Yes, modeling is key.
There is a phrase repeated in the text: values are caught, not taught, meaning kids don't learn morality by reading a textbook chapter on honesty. They absorb it by watching the adults around them navigate difficult situations. But I have to ask, if morality is purely absorbed by watching others, why do the sources emphasize values education as a strict, separate subject in the curriculum? Why do we need to study it if we just naturally mimic it?
That's a great question. Because Bandura's modeling isn't just about mimicry, it's about observing consequences. A child watches an adult tell the truth. But more importantly, they watch what happens to the adult after they tell the truth. Do they get punished? Or are they respected? That observation calibrates the child's internal compass.
So the teacher's reaction is just as important as the action.
Exactly. This is why extremes in adult behavior utterly fail to develop a child's morality. If a teacher or parent relies on authoritarianism, imposing rigid rules, demanding absolute obedience, and using shame, they are forcing the child to operate out of fear. They are artificially trapping that child in Kohlberg stage 1.
Punishment avoidance.
Yes.
And the opposite extreme is just as damaging, right? If the adult uses permissiveness, overindulging the child, avoiding all conflict, providing no boundaries, the child never learns self-regulation.
Never.
They never experience the tension of Erickson's conflicts, so they never develop the virtues of hope or wisdom. Neither extreme cultivates an independent moral framework.
Which is why the sources emphasize that teachers and parents must provide a safe environment for deliberate practice, something called value clarification.
Value clarification.
Yeah, you cannot just force a child to blindly follow your compass. You have to allow young minds to freely choose from alternative, weigh the consequences of those choices, and publicly affirm their beliefs.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, if a student is caught cheating, a permissive teacher ignores it, and an authoritarian teacher just fails them and shames them. A teacher practicing value clarification sits the student down and walks them through the ripple effects of cheating on human trust, guiding them to internalize the universal principle themselves. I'd ask the listener right now, what stands out to you? Think about the people who modeled values for you in that way.
So to bring this all together, we've mapped out the entire architecture of how we decide what matters. We started with axiology and Max Scheler, seeing how we physically feel the gravitational pull of immediate pleasure versus the distant true north of spiritual and holy values. We walked through Kohlberg and Gilligan to see how the brain actually evolves the capacity to prioritize universal justice and deep empathy. We saw how historical forces forge cultural traits like Bayanahan or Porma over substance, creating a landscape of double-edged
It's
swords.
a very tricky landscape.
Yeah. And finally, we looked at how educators use the UNESCO pillars and conscious modeling to help us navigate that landscape.
The invisible architecture is incredibly complex, but once you see the blueprints, you understand exactly why people behave the way they do.
And the most important takeaway for you listening is that you are the active architect of your own value system. Every choice you make, whether it's rejecting the Porma over substance facade to do the actual hard work, or striving to make decisions based on empathy and post-conventional justice rather than just seeking peer approval, every single choice is a deliberate step in your moral development.
It really is.
You aren't just reacting to the world, you are constantly fine-tuning your own compass.
And as we consider how that compass is calibrated today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We established that values are heavily caught, not taught, through the active modeling of teachers, parents, and the physical communities around us.
Right?
We learn by watching the consequences of their actions. But in our modern digital age, we spend hours a day absorbing the behaviors of anonymous global strangers online.
Oh, wow.
Influencers, algorithms, viral commenters. These are entities bound by absolutely no professional code of ethics, operating totally outside the UNESCO pillars. If cognitive modeling is the primary way human beings learn morality, what values is the internet silently teaching our collective moral compass without us even realizing it?
We think we're just scrolling for pleasure values, but we might be fundamentally rewiring our true north every time we log on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the architecture, keep examining your compass, and we'll see you next time.